Alright, so here's the thing. I didn't own the parking spot in front of my house, but if you lived where I lived, you'd understand exactly why it felt like I did. I was renting this narrow little townhouse on a street that always looked like it had one too many cars and not enough patience. You know the type. Trash bins lined up unevenly, delivery trucks double parked like they owned the place, neighbors who smiled at you but absolutely judged how you took your trash out. And right there, directly in front of my gate, was this one sweet spot. Not reserved, not marked, just perfect. Close enough to unload groceries without breaking your back, wide enough so your car door didn't scrape a mailbox, and most importantly, aligned just right so my gate could swing open fully. And for a long time, it was mine. Not officially. I'm not delusional, but in that quiet, unspoken neighborhood way where people just kind of respect patterns. You park there every day, people notice, they leave it alone. It's like an invisible agreement. Until one morning, that agreement got broken. There was this gray sedan sitting in my spot. Nothing flashy, just your average commuter car. Clean, parked neatly, like whoever owned it actually cared. And at first, I didn't think much of it. I figured someone had a guest over, or maybe a contractor, or whatever. It's a public street, right? No big deal. So I parked half a block down, walked back, didn't give it another thought. But then the next morning, it was still there. Same angle, same position, like it hadn't moved an inch. Now that's when my brain started doing that thing. You know, when something small doesn't quite make sense, and it just sits in the back of your mind, poking at you. Still, I let it go. That evening, I came back, and guess what? Still there. Day 3, same story. And now it wasn't just a coincidence anymore. Now it was a pattern. So I started paying attention. Not in a creepy way, just observant. And what I noticed was actually kind of impressive. Whoever owned that car had a routine dialed in like clockwork. They'd leave early, like 7:30 a.m. sharp, and come back around 6 p.m. Weekdays mostly. Weekends? Rarely there. And every single time, they parked in that exact spot. My spot. And that's when the irritation started creeping in. Not full-blown anger. Not yet. Just that low-level annoyance that builds quietly, like background noise you can't turn off. Because here's the thing, it wasn't about ownership. I knew the rules. Street parking is first come, first served. No exceptions. But what was starting to bother me was access. That spot wasn't just convenient, it was functional. My gate opened outward, onto the sidewalk, and if a car parked even slightly too close, it wouldn't open all the way. Not completely blocked, just enough to make everything awkward. And awkward, when it happens once, is fine. When it happens every day, that's when it turns into a problem. Like the morning I had to wrestle my trash bin sideways through a half-open gate because the car was just a little too close. Or the time a delivery driver stood there, holding a package, staring at me like, "You want me to teleport this inside, or what?" Or worse, groceries. Bags cutting into your fingers while you try to angle yourself through a gap like you're sneaking into your own house. Little things, but they stack up. And eventually, that quiet annoyance, it stops being quiet. So one day, I finally caught the driver. He was walking back to the car just as I stepped outside. Mid-30s, business casual, AirPods in. The whole, I'm busy but approachable look. I kept it friendly. No attitude. No confrontation. "Hey man." "Quick thing," I said, gesturing toward the gate. "When you park here, it kind of blocks the swing a bit. Would you mind leaving just a little more space?" He pulled out one AirPod, glanced at the gate, then back at me. And I could already tell, this wasn't going to go the way I hoped. "Yeah, I get it," he said, nodding. "But parking's first come, first serve, right?" And just like that, conversation over. Because technically, he was right. And that's the worst kind of right. The kind where you can't argue, even though you really want to. So I didn't push it. I just nodded back, gave a tight little smile, and let him leave. But inside, yeah, something shifted. Because now it wasn't just inconvenience anymore. It was dismissal. And once that happens, it changes the whole dynamic. Now every time I saw that gray sedan, it felt intentional. Like he knew exactly what he was doing, claiming that space, day after day, without a second thought. And maybe he didn't. Maybe it was just convenience for him. But perception matters. And from where I was standing, it felt like I was slowly losing control over something that used to just work. That's when I started noticing something else. It wasn't just him. More cars started showing up. Different ones. Same behavior. Park all day, leave in the evening. And that's when it clicked. Right on the corner of my block, about a month earlier, this new co-working space had opened. All glass walls, clean branding, people walking in with laptops and iced coffee like they were starring in a startup commercial. And suddenly, my street had become their parking lot. See, their building had paid parking, daily rates. Not cheap either. So what do people do? They look for alternatives. And guess what the closest free alternative was? Yeah, my street. My spot. And now, what used to be a quiet, predictable routine had turned into competition. Not aggressive, not obvious, just subtle, constant pressure. You leave for 10 minutes? Gone. You come back late. Good luck. And every time I saw someone slide into that space right in front of my gate, it felt like watching someone take your seat at a table you've been sitting at for years. Again, not illegal, but definitely personal. And the worst part? I couldn't do anything about it. Or at least, that's what I thought. Because arguing clearly wasn't going to work. And hoping people would just be considerate? Yeah, that's a nice idea, in theory. In reality, people optimize for convenience. Every time. So now I had a choice. Keep dealing with it. Keep squeezing through my own gate like it was some kind of daily obstacle course. Or figure something out. Not louder. Not more aggressive. Just smarter. And that's where things started to get interesting. Alright, let me pause the story for a second, because this is where most people mess up. They think this kind of situation is about territory, or respect, or winning, but it's not. It's about understanding the system you're operating in. According to standard procedure in most U.S. cities, street parking is public, meaning nobody owns that curb space, no matter how long you've been using it. So from a legal perspective, that guy with the gray sedan, he wasn't doing anything wrong. Annoying? Sure. Illegal? Not even close. But here's where it gets interesting. Access rights are a different category entirely. Cities actually recognize that blocking or interfering with a driveway or gate, even partially, can create safety and usability issues. And that opens the door to something a lot of people don't know exists: regulated curb markings designed specifically to protect access, not reserve parking. Now, psychologically, this is where things get tricky. This is a psychological trap. When something feels like yours, even if it isn't legally, your brain treats any intrusion as unfair. That's called perceived ownership, and it's powerful, sometimes irrationally so. The lesson here is simple. If you fight people, you'll lose energy, but if you understand the rules, you can change the game entirely. So yeah, once I stopped thinking about it as my spot and started looking at it as a system problem, everything shifted. Because here's the reality. I wasn't going to out-hustle a whole co-working office worth of people. I wasn't going to win some invisible parking war by waking up earlier, circling the block like a vulture, or leaving passive-aggressive notes on windshields like some neighborhood villain. That's not a solution, that's a lifestyle. And I had no interest in living like that. So instead, I did something most people don't bother doing. I looked it up. Not in a dramatic way, not like I was preparing for battle, just curiosity. City website, couple of tabs open, some boring PDFs, and buried in there was this one section that immediately caught my attention. Curb Access Protection Zone. Now, I had never heard of that before, and at first glance, it didn't sound like much. No big flashy wording, no reserved for homeowner language, just a simple description, a designated no parking buffer near driveways or gates to ensure safe and functional access. And I remember thinking, wait a minute, that's exactly my problem. Not parking, access. And the more I read, the more it clicked. This wasn't about claiming territory, it was about defining boundaries. Legitimate ones, enforceable ones. And the process? Surprisingly simple. You submit a request. You provide a basic diagram showing how your gate opens. You explain how parked vehicles interfere with that movement. You pay a small fee. And then, the city evaluates it. That's it. No confrontation. No arguing. No convincing strangers to be more considerate. Just process. So I filled it out. Took maybe 15 minutes. Drew a quick sketch. Nothing fancy. Just arrows showing the gate swing and how close cars were getting. Uploaded a couple photos. Paid the fee. Hit submit. And honestly, I didn't expect much. Because if you've ever dealt with city requests before, you know the drill. You submit something, and then it disappears into the void. Days turn into weeks. Weeks turn into maybe someday. So I moved on. Kept parking wherever I could. Kept doing the awkward gate shuffle. Same routine, same gray sedan, same quiet frustration. Until one morning, everything changed. It was early, like barely awake, coffee not even brewed yet, and I heard noise outside. Not normal street noise. This was organized. Engines, metal clanking, voices, the kind of sound that makes you pause mid-step and go, okay, what's happening? So I looked out the window, and there they were. City trucks, bright orange cones, workers in reflective vests setting up along the curb right in front of my house. And I just stood there for a second, processing. Wait, is this? No way. I stepped outside, trying not to look too eager. You know, casual, like I wasn't 100% invested in whatever was about to happen. But inside, yeah, I was locked in. One of the workers had a measuring tape out, marking distances along the curb. Another was setting up what looked like a stencil. And then I saw it. The paint. Fresh, bright, unmistakable. They started marking a section of the curb right next to my gate. Not the whole space, just a portion of it. A clean, defined buffer zone. No parking. Official. And in that moment, everything clicked into place. Not because I had won anything, but because the system had responded exactly the way it was supposed to. They weren't giving me ownership. They were protecting access. And that distinction? That's everything. Within an hour, it was done. The cones came down. The trucks rolled out. And what was left behind was subtle, almost unremarkable if you didn't know the context. But to me, it was a complete shift in reality. Because now, that space had rules. Clear ones. Enforceable ones. And people noticed immediately. That same evening, I watched from my window as a car slowed down, clearly aiming for that spot, then hesitated. The driver leaned forward, looked at the curb marking, paused, and then kept driving. Just like that. No argument. No confusion. No negotiation. The decision had already been made, not by me, but by the system. And over the next few days, the change was obvious. Cars stopped trying to squeeze into that space. No more guessing how close was too close. No more awkward angles. Just space. Clean, consistent, reliable space. My gate opened fully every single time. Trash day? Easy. Deliveries? No problem. Groceries? Walk straight in. And that gray sedan? Gone. Completely. I didn't see it again. Not once. And I'll be honest, there was a moment where I expected some kind of pushback. A note. A complaint. Maybe someone knocking on my door, ready to argue about their lost parking. Because that's how these things usually go, right? You change something, someone reacts. But for a while, nothing. Just quiet improvement. Until about a week later. It was early evening, sun starting to dip, that soft golden light hitting the street. The kind of moment where everything feels calm, almost cinematic. And then knock knock. I opened the door, and there he was. Not the same guy with the AirPods, different person. Slightly older, maybe late 30s, dressed a bit sharper. Calm expression, but you could tell. He had a reason for being there. Hey, he said, polite but direct. Quick question, are you the one who requested the curb marking out here? And right away, I knew exactly what this was about. So I didn't dodge it. Yeah, I said, that was me. He nodded slowly, like he expected that answer. I work over at the co-working space on the corner, he continued, gesturing down the street. And parking's gotten a lot tighter lately. There it was. Not aggressive, not confrontational, but definitely intentional. And this is where most people either get defensive or apologetic. They try to justify themselves, over-explain, soften the situation. I didn't do either. I just told the truth. I didn't request a parking spot. I said, keeping my tone even. I requested clearance for my gate. Cars were blocking it. And then I stopped talking. Because silence is powerful. He looked at the curb, then back at the gate, then at me. And you could see the calculation happening in real time. This wasn't about inconvenience anymore. This was about legitimacy. And he knew it. He let out a small breath, nodded once. Yeah, that's fair, he said. And just like that, tension dissolved. No argument. No escalation. Because there was nothing to argue against. I wasn't taking something from him. I was protecting something that mattered. And that's a completely different conversation. We talked for another minute or two. Nothing intense, just practical. He mentioned that their office had been struggling with parking since they opened. Too many people, not enough affordable options. And honestly, I got it. They weren't trying to be disruptive. They were just optimizing for convenience. same as anyone would. But here's the interesting part. About a week after that conversation, I started noticing fewer and fewer co-working cars on the street. At first, I thought maybe it was coincidence. But then it became obvious. The pattern had changed. The street felt lighter, less crowded, more breathable. And eventually, I found out why. Their office had worked out a deal with a nearby parking garage, discounted rates for members. Not free, but reasonable enough that people actually used it. And just like that, the pressure on the street disappeared. No drama, no tickets, no neighborhood wars, just adjustment. And the thing is, none of that would have happened if I had taken the obvious route. If I had argued, complained, tried to win against individuals. Because individuals aren't the problem. Systems are. And once you understand that, you stop fighting people, and you start fixing situations. So yeah, looking back on the whole thing, it's kind of funny, because what started as this small, annoying, everyday inconvenience turned into a pretty clear lesson about how people, systems, and expectations all collide in ways we don't really think about until we're forced to deal with them. And I'll be honest with you, if this had happened to me a few years earlier, I probably would have handled it completely differently. I would have taken it personally, left a note, maybe a sarcastic one, something like, "Hey, love what you've done with my parking spot." You know, that passive-aggressive energy that feels satisfying for about 5 seconds and then just makes everything worse. Or I would have tried to outplay them. Wake up earlier. Move my car strategically. Treat it like some weird daily competition that slowly eats away at your patience. And the crazy part is, a lot of people live like that. Not just with parking, with noise, neighbors, shared spaces, anything where there's friction but no clear ownership. They get stuck in this loop of low-level conflict, thinking the solution is to win against other people. But here's the reality. Most of the time, that approach doesn't scale. Because for every one person you win against, there's another one right behind them. Different car, same behavior. That's the trap. And this is exactly why I say, the lesson here is stop treating these situations like personal battles and start treating them like system problems. Because once you zoom out, you start to see what's really going on. That guy with the gray sedan, he wasn't targeting me. He wasn't waking up thinking, how can I inconvenience this specific person today? He saw an available space, and he took it. Simple as that. And the co-working crowd? Same thing. They weren't trying to take over the neighborhood. They were responding to incentives. Paid parking versus free street parking. Convenience versus cost. That's it. And when you understand that, you stop assigning intent where there isn't any. You stop building this invisible narrative where everyone's against you. Because they're not. They're just optimizing for themselves. Same as you. Now, from a legal perspective, this is where things get really important, because a lot of people assume that if something feels unfair, there must be a rule against it. But that's not how it works. Most systems aren't designed to protect feelings. They're designed to maintain function, flow, access, safety. And once I realized that, everything became clearer. I didn't need ownership of that space. I didn't need special treatment. I just needed the system to recognize a functional problem, and it did. That's the difference. And then there's the psychological side of it, which, honestly, is probably the most interesting part. Because this whole situation, it could have easily spiraled. Frustration builds. You start noticing every little thing. Your brain keeps score. This guy parked too close yesterday. That one didn't even try to leave space. People are so inconsiderate. And before you know it, you're not reacting to reality anymore. You're reacting to a narrative you've built. This is a psychological trap. Your brain turns patterns into intentions, and intentions into personal attacks, even when they're not. And once you fall into that, every interaction gets heavier. More emotional, more charged, and way harder to resolve. But the moment you step out of that loop, and you ask a different question, not who's wrong here, but what actually fixes this, everything shifts. Because now you're not stuck in reaction mode anymore. You're in solution mode. And solutions tend to be quieter, less dramatic, but way more effective. That's exactly what happened here. No confrontation, no escalation, no viral neighbor from hell situation. Just a small adjustment applied at the right level. And it worked, not just for me, but for everyone involved. My access improved. The co-working space adapted. The street became less congested. That's what a good solution does. It reduces friction across the board, not just for one person. So if you're dealing with something similar, Whether it's parking, shared space, noise, whatever. Here's the question I'd leave you with. Are you trying to win against people? Or are you trying to fix the situation? Because those are two very different paths. One leads to stress, arguments, and temporary victories. The other leads to actual change. And yeah, it might not feel as satisfying in the moment. There's no dramatic showdown. No big "I told you so." But what you get instead is something way better. Consistency, clarity, peace of mind. And honestly, I'll take that over a parking spot any day. So now I'm curious, what would you have done in that situation? Would you have confronted the drivers? Left notes? Tried to claim the space? Or would you have gone the system route like I did? Drop your thoughts below, because I guarantee everyone's got a different way of handling this kind of thing.